I almost think in the UK, Dan, we're just used to censorship now, aren't we? It's so disgusting.
This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. To truly grasp what's at stake here, consider how dramatically the media landscape has shifted in how people consume information. Legacy media is dying, and that's their own fault. People are tired of being lied to and manipulated, hence the explosion for alternative independent news that is honest, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. People want sources of information they can trust to help us move, grow, and live freely in this world. Many of you have joined me on this journey since 2021, when I first raised the alarm about Prince Harry covertly operating in the United States, undermining the U.S. Constitution, and pushing policies that erode the First Amendment. I'm grateful to see that we have independent journalists who once worked within the mainstream and witnessed firsthand how Harry and Meghan are able to control the narrative in legacy media. This leads me now to a very compelling clip from Lauren the Insider's recent interview with Dan Wooten. I have to say, I'm truly appreciative of the kind support from both Dan and Lauren in some of the work that I have done. And I'd like to build on their conversation about Harry and Meghan's relationship with free speech. So allow me to walk you through this clip, filling in some key details we haven't connected before. And quite frankly, had this conversation not taken place, I don't think I would have connected the dots here. Let me go ahead and show you what I mean.
I almost think in the UK, Dan, we're just used to censorship now, aren't we? It's so disgusting. But I believe that Meghan or her team are weaponizing money, power, and influence to suppress the narratives they don't want. And we have been fed a pack of lies time and time again by the Meghan Markle machine. And it is terrible to silence content creators for telling the truth, because if they weren't telling the truth, they would be legaled.
I have to agree here. Money, power, and influence definitely plays a role here. However, Harry and Meghan are a part of something much bigger than their PR team trying to just manage their brand. It's my hope here that we start to expand thinking around this couple and who's behind them. Like, if we look at the energy that's invested into forcing certain Harry and Meghan narratives onto the world, now going on 10 years, there is no way this kind of a relentless PR be financially sustainable if there weren't deep pockets behind them. Now, I've said this before, but from the moment Meghan Markle was forced onto us in 2016, the propaganda being cranked out on a daily basis hasn't stopped since. And when you think about it, between managing or funding all of these fan pages and the Sussex Squad for all of these years, we're looking at tens of millions of dollars that has been spent alone in PR. I personally don't think that Harry and Meghan would stick their hands in their own pockets to pay for all of that. Especially when you look at the various causes that Harry and Meghan chose to support, where taxpayer-funded money was coming from. Yeah, I somehow think that a lot of this that we were exposed to had been most definitely politically motivated. Lauren mentions the censorship in the UK, and I think you can't say UK censorship without connecting Harry and Meghan and their influence in driving the censorship agenda, with the covert work they were doing with people like Renee DiResta, Tristan Harris, and CCDH's Imran Ahmed. This group of friends of Harry and Meghan helped get the UK Online Safety Act passed by giving their recommendations to Parliament on what to do to stop mis- and disinformation, otherwise known as censor disfavored speech. Harry and Meghan know they've been lying to everyone, and in my opinion, I think it was all intentional.
They tried to destroy my life for telling the truth about them, for reporting the truth about them. And I've come back and I will keep on doing it because I will not let them win. But it is very, very disturbing. I was absolutely disgusted when I saw Prince Harry and Meghan Markle presenting this award for the NAACP earlier in the week, and they awarded it to this hard left, anti-white, racist woman, awful woman, straight from central casting, exactly who you would expect them to support.
This is the Dr. Marianne Franks that I've talked about, who is notorious for professing her truth, making claims that the censorship industrial complex is a conspiracy theory by right-wing MAGA. This is not an accident Harry and Meghan picked this woman. And Harry wants us to believe that he is a champion for protecting free speech and democracy. No, this is being done to set the stage and create the optics, because when the shit really hits the fan, they're going to fall back onto this woman.
But within this announcement, Harry tried to claim that he did believe in free speech. But of course, he got totally tongue-tied because he doesn't believe in free speech. He believes in controlled speech. That is the reason he wants to shut down social media platforms.
That is correct, because Harry is a globalist, and these globalists want cognitive security. That is the ultimate end goal. Harry and Meghan gave themselves away from the very beginning. If you recall, in the engagement interview, Harry's like, yeah, we're going to work with the youth to help them see the world in the right way. And the only way to achieve that is by controlling cognitive function. If you can achieve that, then you can influence behavior and predict outcomes, like who's going to be elected or where you're going to spend your money. This is the ultimate control that the globalists want.
I think the thing that is most decrepit about what him and Meghan Markle have done is that they have used grieving parents who lost their children to suicide. They have used them to advance their censorship message.
Yes, it's true Harry and Meghan are vultures, but it's not only them. It's all of the globalists, particularly the left, who are using vulnerable children to push this censorship agenda. The excuse of the kids are being used as the Trojan horse. I think it's really important that we tie this back to the Twitter files exposing the collusion with government to censor speech. That is when we saw this hard pivot of everybody who had been talking about stopping mis and disinformation to now all of a sudden we need to protect the safety of the kids online. I mean, if you haven't noticed, after Elon Musk had bought Twitter, there was this aggressive push to get legislation into place, like the Online Safety Bill in the UK, the Digital Services Act in the EU. Canada and Australia also have legislation that has been put through. And if you've been paying attention, all of these laws that are hurriedly being put into place are designed to put pressure onto the United States to conform. You see, this censorship complex is still very much alive. It's just here in the United States, there's no more funding for it. If you haven't noticed, ever since Trump got back into office and made restoring free speech a priority, you rarely ever hear the terms mis and disinformation and projects that are being funded to combat mis and disinformation. Now the way around it is promoting mental health and using the children, as well as the infrastructure and controlling those algorithms. You see, Harry and Meghan have been exploiting any kind of suffering that has taxpayer cash tagged to it. That's what was going on under the Biden regime. Now, I don't think they're getting a dime from the U.S., and is why R12 Fugazi Public Charity has closed, allegedly. They're still doing the work, but most likely they're getting their funding from the UK or UN now to drive these censorship projects here in the United States at the state level.
Trust me, mark my words, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle want a censorship state. They want you shut down, Lauren. They want me shut down. The fact that they are coming for individual commentators on X is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, but this is nothing new. These targeted attack campaigns started as early as 2018 with Harry and Meghan going after people on Tumblr and Quora. And then after Nick Clegg had moved over to Facebook, in 2019, you started to hear that people were losing Facebook accounts if anybody criticized or talked about the pregnancy. At the time, Harry and Meghan were still working royals and had the power of the palace behind them to get people taken down. And given the fact that James Holt worked for Nick Clegg, is it any surprise that people were getting removed from Facebook so easily? And what's really infuriating about this is that they took away people's communities to protect the lies that Meghan Markle had been telling. People should be angry that the palace participated in this, which they had absolutely no right to do. Just because they control the media in the UK doesn't mean that they control American speech.
Because we are in a new era. And I've seen very close up, and I don't know if people are interested in this, but I think it's important that I just explain, because I always like to, on my show, sort of explain how it works in the background. And I've seen since I left GB News, or was sacked from GB News, and what was it, 2023?
Yeah, let's take a moment and quickly revisit how Harry and Meghan and the Sussex Squad did Dan Wooten dirty. We can't forget that Dan was also the target of a deliberate smear campaign. Peter Jukes' Byline Times, closely linked to the press reform nonprofit Hacked Off, played a key role here. Through Graham Johnson, who writes for Byline Investigates and has ties to Harry's ongoing legal actions, the outlet launched attacks on Dan Wooten, amplified with the help of the Sussex Squad. This campaign, it kicked off in July of 2023 with a series of damaging pieces in Byline Times. Then, in August 2023, while Harry was in Japan for Sent to Bali, we had Sarah Data reportedly raising around £100,000 to fund yet another Byline expose. Then we saw the pressure really peak in September 2023 when GB News suspended Dan Wooten after receiving over 8,000 Ofcom complaints. Many of those likely came from the Sussex Squad. As we know, the Sussex Squad has a history of doing this kind of shit. Then to pile on even further against Dan Wooten, Byline Times then published another damaging piece in October, widely seen as funded or amplified by the Sussex Squad's efforts. This shows you how nasty Harry and Meghan are. Essentially, they tried to torpedo Dan Wooten's career and ensure he would never work again in the mainstream media. This obvious smear campaign appeared to be blocking any chance of return to GB News or similar mainstream media platforms. And that was the goal. They literally wanted to destroy Dan Wooten. But look at him now. I think the joke's on them.
That GB News has even been captured by Harry and Meghan Markle. And I've done it in a few ways. There was a meeting with a billionaire who Meghan was close to, who had some links to one of the billionaires who run GB News. So that shows you how they do it on like a very deep state type level.
So this is the interesting part that connected a few more dots for me. I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at who Dan Wooten is possibly talking about. If I had to guess, the GB News billionaire is Sir Paul Marshall. So a little background on Sir Paul Marshall. He's a British hedge fund billionaire, investor, and media proprietor best known for co-founding the investment firm Marshall Wace in 1997 with Ian Wace. Marshall has built his fortune through finance, but has increasingly become influential in British media and politics. In recent years, he has invested heavily into media outlets, backing the television channel GB News, owning the online publication Unheard, and purchasing the long-running magazine The Spectator in 2024. In 2016, he was knighted for services to education and philanthropy. His wealth is estimated at $1.1 billion. And a little fun fact for everyone that I didn't know until today is that he is the father of Winston Marshall. Yes, the musician and political commentator best known as the former banjoist and guitarist for the folk rock band Mumford & Sons. He currently has transitioned into media and commentary, hosting a podcast and writing on politics, culture, and of all topics, free speech. But getting back to the connection with Meghan, I think there is a strong possibility the billionaire connected to this billionaire, Sir Paul Marshall, is Ken Griffin. You see, Ken Griffin is an American billionaire investor and the founder and CEO of the hedge fund giant Citadel, as well as the market-making firm Citadel Securities. He's worth about $51 billion and just so happened to be hanging out with Harry and Meghan at the Katy Perry concert back in November of 2023. Ken Griffin absolutely knows Sir Paul Marshall because not only are they part of the same small industry, but reportedly discussed joining a consortium of investors led by Sir Paul Marshall to bid for the British newspaper group The Telegraph back in 2023.
like they just run propaganda now for Harry and Meghan. Oh, Meghan's brand's brilliant. They've sold this out. They're telling me this. And it is so disappointing because it shows you how corruptible the mainstream media is, Lauren. So you've got one individual reporter who's got this weird obsession with being the new Omid Scobie. So you've got that sort of on the ground level. But more sinister is the fact that Meghan is using her billionaire connections to make one of the investors in GB News tone down the coverage of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. Now, I know that because I worked at GB News, and indeed I saw it happen in the final weeks and months when I was there.
So the big question is, how does Meghan know Ken Griffin? That's the million-dollar question, and I see three possibilities. The first one, which I think is the least likely, that the Katy Perry concert was the first time that Harry and Meghan were meeting this guy, Ken Griffin. Now, if you recall, Harry and Meghan flew on Ken Griffin's plane with Misha Nunu and Michael Keeves. Michael Keeves is connected to the Kardashians as well as the Clintons. But I don't think that's it. The second possibility, which I think is highly likely, is that Harry and Meghan knew Ken Griffin before they went to this concert. Back in September 2023, when these attacks were going on with Dan Wooten, Harry joins this coalition called Press Forward. For those that don't remember, Harry and Meghan couldn't stop at controlling the mainstream media. They now have to come after us. So back in September 2023, a coalition of 22 donors announced Press Forward, a national initiative to strengthen communities and democracy by supporting local news and information with an infusion of more than $500 million over the next 5 years. Press Forward will enhance local journalism at an unprecedented level to recenter local news as a force for community cohesion, support new models and solutions that are ready to scale, and restore integrity back into journalism. And it just so happens that the fiscal sponsor, the one divvying out all the government money and mixing it up with all of these foundations and washing it, is the Miami Foundation. And this just happens to be the foundation that Ken Griffin dumps his millions into projects and initiatives to help with society and democracy. It truly is a small world, huh? So now that we understand this and we look at this picture of Harry and Ken Griffin in November 2023, I can bet you that Harry sat there the whole time talking to Ken Griffin about how horrible the media has been to Meghan. It's likely they were talking about Press Forward and how they're planning to go grassroots to capture local journalism now. And then, more than likely, the topic of the Telegraph came up. And that's how we find out, or Harry, I guess, puts two and two together about GB News, and, that's it. The rest is history. Now, could it be they know Ken Griffin through philanthropy? It's possible. Or a third option, which definitely falls now into conspiracy theory territory. You see, Ken Griffin was named in the Epstein files. Now, don't you find it a little odd that Meghan could have been sitting right next to a billionaire, but she chose to put Harry next to him? So back in June of 2016, the former principal deputy White House counsel and former White House counsel to President Barack Obama had an exchange with Jeffrey Epstein. At the time, she was working with Goldman Sachs as the chief legal officer and general counsel. She wanted to talk to Jeffrey Epstein about going to work for Citadel. Ken Griffin wanted to hire her. So you can see there, she's asking to speak and writes, "I forgot to tell you something." And then Jeffrey Epstein writes back and he says, "This one, I can negotiate. No limitations. It could be fun. Feel free to invite Ken to my house for Friday or Saturday. He can check with Pritzker or Leon Black. No downside." And Kathy's like, "Trust me, this is way below his and your pay grade to be negotiating," meaning whatever package deal to go work for Citadel. Now, this is what Jeffrey writes back next. He goes, No, it's right. We can have fun. Nobody going to jail. I think you will be surprised." Kathy responds back and says, "I'll meet with this guy again on Monday or Tuesday and see if I can find out more." Jeffrey then says, "Good. There is the off chance that Griffin might just be interested in a woman." Kathy then writes back, I ain't no affirmative action, followed by, I meant romantically. And then Jeffrey finishes off by saying, New World Order. And that was the end of this conversation. There was no further information on whether or not Jeffrey Epstein was able to meet Ken Griffith because he didn't know him. As it said in an email to Tom Pritzker asking about what this guy Ken Griffin is like. You can see Jeffrey Epstein says to Tom Pritzker, making money on the downside, much easier now. Kathleen Rumbler is in Chicago tomorrow seeing Rahm, and now Ken Griffin wants to hire her. I never met him. Thoughts? Pritzker writes back, Rahm needs to be beyond bold. He is on the verge of losing the city, think Baltimore. I'm talking on the scale of declaring curfews and enforcing it. He won't do it. Ken is an interesting guy, very smart, a bit like Summers in the sense of awkward social skills. He's building a sustainable business model that doesn't require being smart every day. Lots of turnover at Citadel, but that may be more at trading desks where points of profit are in play. Ken is all in, all of the time. In my view, he was very decent in the divorce drama and is someone who prides himself on civic engagement and keeping his word. So Rahm, that they're talking about, is Rahm Emanuel, who is the brother of Ari Emanuel from WME. Now, from a political perspective, Ken Griffin is all over the place. He supports both Democrats and Republicans. But what's interesting is seeing that he contributed the most money to Rahm Emanuel's campaign for Chicago mayor. I mean, let's not forget, Rahm Emanuel was chief of staff to Barack Obama and then also served as the ambassador to Japan under Joe Biden. You can see here, Rahm is originally from Chicago, and Rahm went to Northwestern, and Rahm was mayor of Chicago for a good 8 years. Now, the reason why I'm pointing all of this Chicago-ness out is because all roads are leading back to Obama. In 2017, Ken Griffin gave over $1 million to the Obama Foundation. Now, when you look at all of this censorship stuff and how it all started with Obama, with this Russia hoax.
Documents that you're referencing that I released, declassified and released, spells out in great detail exactly what happens when you have some of the most powerful people in our country directly leading at the helm, President Obama and his senior-most national security cabinet, James Comey, John Brennan, James Clapper, and Susan Rice, and others, essentially making a very intentional decision to create this manufactured, politicized piece of intelligence with the objective of subverting the will of the American people, who in November of 2016 delivered a historic victory to President Trump, defeating Hillary Clinton. And President Obama and his team, their goal was to essentially not accept the decision of the American people and to use this manufactured, politicized intelligence as a means to enact what would become essentially a years-long coup against President Trump.
And why do all of these people want censorship? It's because they don't want all of this dirtiness to come out. And now you see the connections with Epstein, the so-called corruption that we have with the NGOs, and all of the money that's being stolen from us, and the waste and fraud. It's not just Harry and Meghan that want to shut us up. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious on other topics. You're seeing how people are getting shut down. Meghan and Harry definitely have lied to the public, and a lot of those lies and a lot of the backlash that they face is because they're in this situation. Like the rest of these lying, cheating scumbags. It's actually this guy, Rahm, who openly stated to not let a crisis go to waste, meaning take advantage of it. So the key takeaway with this third possibility is showing you how everyone is interconnected and rolling right back to Obama and the Clintons in Meghan's orbit. And these are the people who advocated for cracking down on free speech, aka stopping mis and disinformation, because, we can't have our elections stolen, can't have Donald Trump get elected again. This all goes back to trying to control people's behavior, because they didn't expect Hillary Clinton to lose in 2016. And Obama vowed never to allow it to happen again. And that's why we saw this crackdown on speech. And Harry and Meghan and all the globalists were in it from the beginning. because Donald Trump threw a wrench in those globalist plans. And when you think about King Charles and his whole vision for Agenda 2030, he also would have been motivated to ensure that Biden got into office. So what do I believe happened? Well, you saw what happened in 2020, and you saw how nobody did anything to stop those two from interfering with our election. I mean, we all saw Representative Jason Smith's letter fall on deaf ears.
Obviously, I wouldn't be controlled, but I saw it happen on other shows, and I saw the types of pressure they were even putting on me.
Yeah.
So they can keep doing this in the mainstream media. Look at how controlled so many reporters are now. Even The Sun, another former employer of mine, even the Daily Mail. But what Harry and Meghan want to do is shut down the people who are doing the alternative.
The point of doing this video is hopefully making people realize that the core issue here extends far beyond just Harry and Meghan. And even as alternative media right now continues to grow and thrive, we're far from safe. I mean, look at what's going on with me and what they have done to this channel. And I'm sure it'll get worse if I continue to keep branching or extending outside just Harry and Meghan. I mean, I see what they do whenever I talk about the king. So you know that there is a level of control that's still going on. What concerns me the most right now is how everybody is so distracted. And just like the UK Online Safety Act that was quietly passed in October of 2023, there's similar behaviors happening now with this push for age verification and digital IDs. Just this week alone, UK Parliament has gone into overdrive. The amount of overreach that is now being put forward and recommended to pass through as law is quite troubling. What this looks like to me is that they're creating a digital prison for UK citizens. In case you missed it this week, on March 9th, two major surveillance-related bills advanced through Parliament, each pointing toward broader government authority. They're taking away more of your privacy, and they're putting tighter limits on protest activity. What does that mean? Well, the UK Lords spent much of March 9th dismantling what little legal cover existed for anonymous protests and privacy and building new tools to suppress it entirely. So here's what the Lords did this week that I think Brits should be infuriated. So these peers voted down an amendment that would have kept the DVLA database, which is equivalent to the DMV database that we have here in the United States for driver's licenses, out of live facial recognition searches. You see, that database isn't a surveillance archive. It was originally built to verify driver licenses. It contains photographs linked to the confirmed real-world identities of most UK drivers, and the Lords just cleared the path for police to now run people's faces against whatever's in the database at public gatherings. So essentially, a licensing bureaucracy would become an identification engine, and this repurposing happened quietly through a vote that I don't think anybody is talking about. And get this, the Lords also voted down a proposed defense of reasonable excuse for concealing identity at protests. The amendment would have shifted the burden of proof onto police officers to justify why a face covering made someone arrestable. Y'all see where this is going, right? In this two-tiered justice system. Does anybody think the UK is going to arrest someone wearing a burqa? Covered head to toe? Absolutely not. This is being done to stop the protests of the native Brits. So with this vote, 172 to 88, it means that wearing a mask at a protest carries no legal defense, even if your reason is documented, principled, and directly tied to avoiding government surveillance. These damn people approved new Home Secretary powers to designate organizations as extreme criminal protest groups, passing 200 to 162. The designation criminalizes membership, promotion, fundraising, and providing any form of support to a designated group. No court makes that call. The Home Secretary now does. And that would be Shabana Mahmood. So now when you put these three votes that happened this week together, you start to see this picture forming. The Lords rejected a right to shield your face from surveillance. They rejected a legal defense for trying and handed ministers a new tool to criminalize the groups most likely to show up at protests in the first place. There's a lot of reason to be concerned with what's going on in the UK, especially when it comes to digital ID and how they're going to be using your data. I don't trust these people for 1 second. They have abused their powers, and it's clear there is a two-tiered system that is against native Brits. As an observer, just watching what's going on from across the pond, I don't think you can really trust these people. I'm worried for my British friends and where this is all heading. I see it happening here in the United States, especially with laws that are currently being proposed here in New York that nobody's talking about, but should be talking about. So I came across this as I was doing this work here, and I am floored that this is even being suggested. So if you haven't heard, probably not, because nobody's talking about it, Communist New York just proposed the most invasive state-level age verification bill the country's ever seen. Bill SO810 would extend age verification requirements down to the device itself. Internet-connected devices, operating system providers, and app stores would all be required and mandated to implement what the bill calls age assurance before users can access their own hardware and software ecosystem. So before you can even enjoy the product that you paid for and own, you have to obey with the New York State government and verify your age. According to Reclaim the Net, they say this is more than a social media platform asking for your birth date. It's your phone, your laptop, your operating system demanding proof of who you are before letting you use them normally. Like, this is ridiculous. The bill defines age assurance as any method that can reasonably determine the age category of a user, using methods that reasonably prevent against circumvention. That deliberately broad language that you just heard gives power to this bitch that you see in front of you, New York Attorney General Letitia James, whose office will write the specific compliance rules under Section 1545. The methods she's already floated for existing Safe for Kids Act give a clear picture of where this is all going. Biometric assessment and government-issued ID verification. Letitia James published a notice of proposed rulemaking for the Safe for Kids Act on September 15, 2025, opened public comments through December 1, 2025, and now has until December 1, 2026 to finalize the rules. The Safe for Kids Act itself takes effect 180 days after those final rules drop. SO 8102 would layer these same requirements onto device-level infrastructure. The Attorney General writes the rules. The Attorney General enforces them. The verification methods the Attorney General already prefers involve your face and your government ID. Compare that to California's AB 1043, which takes effect January 1st, 2027, and a similar Colorado bill. Those laws require operating systems to build interfaces where users self-declare their age, generating a digital age signal shared with developers via real-time API on request. That's already a persistent age tracking layer baked into every device, broadcasting your age bracket to every app that asks. New York's approach goes further. SO 8102 explicitly allows verification methods drawn from the Safe for Kids Act framework, where commercially reasonable methods include biometric analysis and government ID uploads. Now, this scares me to death. California asks you to state your age, but New York wants to verify it against your face or your passport. And of course, the reason why they're doing all of this is to keep our kids safe and to reduce the mental health crisis that's going on. So according to Attorney General James, she said, Children and teenagers are struggling with high rates of anxiety and depression because of addictive features on social media platforms. Now, of course, they're using this excuse and positioning every age verification push about child safety and about a system that verifies your age via government ID, which links your device usage to your legal identity. What this means? It ties your app activity to your real name. It creates a record connecting who you are to what you do on every internet-connected device you own, stored somewhere and accessible to data breaches, law enforcement requests, and purposes the state hasn't really defined yet. I tell you, I'm like beyond frustrated at seeing what's happening here in New York itself. Like, we have Beaverface Hochul, who is a globalist. We have Marxist Letitia James. And then we have Islamist terrorist sympathizer Mayor, who sticks his middle finger up at native New Yorkers and then bends us over to tax us more. Oh, you know that he's going to be all about supporting this, because wait till those hate speech laws start creeping in and talking about cracking down on Islamophobia. At least this bill was just introduced. So Monday, I'm just going to go to my local representative and give him hell on why this is such a bad idea. But I'm going to have to use a little reverse psychology and think about what a progressive libtard would say. Because if I go in there talking about the Constitution, no luck. I'm going to have to say something like, this is going to widen the digital equity gap because now you're going to require illegals to have to give ID and they're going to be afraid to do so. I mean, you really have to think the way that they do because this is who they're putting first. And that's, very clear and evident in these blue states. These Marxist socialists are like the most miserable people on the planet. I think that's why so many people can't stand Meghan and Harry, because this is what they represent. And it's these people to blame for destroying the fabric of the West. It truly is their fault. Now, finally, leaving you with this last thought, I think one of the reasons why there's such a hard push for censorship is that they just don't want to hear how their policies have failed. They are so determined to see this through, and 2030 is coming up real quick. There is a desperate attempt to put Democrats back into power. So recognize that we're going to start to see similar tactics that we saw back in 2020, especially since our midterms are coming up. There's going to be a level of aggressiveness to silence voices. So it's important that we stay alert and try to put a stop to what Harry and Meghan have been doing. We know that they're not stopping. They haven't stopped. This is the one thing that they've been consistent with. What we have to now shift our train of thought or the way that we see things is that they're a part of a bigger problem that we have that's affecting all Western countries, which is the suppression of free speech. But those are just my thoughts that I thought I would share with everybody. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.